My name is Ren Holloway. I was 27 years old the afternoon I learned my parents had sold my grandmother's house behind her back for $480,000 and that they had been planning it since March. They forged her signature on a power of attorney. They told the buyers she was in early dementia. They threw away her wedding china to stage the rooms. They did not tell her. They did not tell me. They thought she was a sweet old woman in slippers who watched game shows and made banana bread. What they did not know was that 3 months before they put the house on the market, my grandmother had already walked into a law office on Caldwell Street, sat down across from an attorney named Margaret Vance, and signed exactly the kind of paperwork that turns a quiet 78-year-old woman into the most dangerous person in any room she chooses to sit in. By the time my parents popped champagne at the closing table on a Friday afternoon in October, my grandmother already knew everything. The buyers, the price, the forged signature, the lie about her mind. And she had been waiting, very calmly, for them to finish handing her the rope. If your family has ever decided you were too soft to fight back, tell me where you're watching from in the comments. And if you are new to her silence, please subscribe, because tonight I want to tell you what happened the day my grandmother smiled at her own daughter across a notarized table and said, "Honey, you have made a beautiful mistake." My grandmother's name is Adeline Holloway. Everyone calls her Addie. She was born in 1948 in a small house on Wisteria Lane in Greenville, South Carolina, the same house my parents tried to sell out from under her 76 years later. My grandfather, Earl, built the back porch with his own hands in 1971, the year my father was born. He died in 2009, and Addie never remarried. She kept the house exactly the way Earl left it, except for the kitchen, which she repainted a soft yellow because, in her words, grief is dark enough. She raised my father, Davis, in that house. She raised my Aunt Lorraine in that house. And when my mother, Marcy, married my father, she walked into that house on her wedding day and decided, somewhere very privately, that one day it would be hers. My mother was not a cruel woman in the loud way. She was cruel in the slow way. She corrected my grandmother's grammar at Thanksgiving. She called the wallpaper depressing. She rearranged Addie's spice cabinet every time she visited and pretended she was helping. My father went along with it because going along with my mother is what he has done for 34 years. He calls it peace. The rest of us call it cowardice with a wedding ring on. Addie noticed everything. She just never said anything in the moment. She would write things down. Dates, comments, small slights, in a green spiral notebook she kept in the drawer next to her reading glasses. When I was little, I once asked her what the notebook was for. She said, "Ren, when people show you who they are, the polite thing is to take notes." I was 9. I did not understand it then. I understand it now. The trouble started 2 springs ago, when my grandfather's old pension paid out a final lump sum into Addie's account. Around $83,000. The house itself, fully paid off, was worth around $450,000 in a good market. Add the land, the original hardware, the historic district designation, and the right buyer would pay close to $500,000. My mother knew this because my mother is the kind of woman who knows what every house on every street is worth without ever working in real estate. She started using the word estate planning at family dinners. She started saying, gently, that Addie was slowing down. She started suggesting that Addie move into something easier, a small condo on the other side of town where my mother had, very conveniently, already toured 3 units. Addie smiled at all of it. She poured more sweet tea. She said, "We'll see, dear." And she went home and wrote it all down in the green notebook. In February, my mother escalated. She drove Addie to a doctor's appointment without telling anyone, including the doctor, that the visit was about cognitive screening. She had pre-filled the intake form herself, checking boxes for confusion, forgetfulness, and disorientation. Addie, who has the memory of a chess player and the patience of a heron, took the screening, scored a 29 out of 30, and watched my mother's face fall in real time. The doctor said, very clearly, in front of both of them, "Mrs. Holloway, your cognition is excellent for any age, let alone 78. My mother said, "Of course," and helped her into the car as if nothing had happened. That night, Addie called Margaret Vance. Margaret Vance had been my grandfather Earl's attorney for 31 years. She is in her 60s, wears reading glasses on a beaded chain, and has the kind of polite Southern voice that sounds like sugar until she opens a file folder. Addie made an appointment for the following Tuesday. She did not tell my father. She did not tell my mother. She told me because she trusted me and because she needed a witness who was related to her by blood, but not by my mother's influence. I drove her. I sat in the waiting room. I did not ask questions because Addie does not like questions she has not yet decided to answer. In Margaret Vance's office that Tuesday, my grandmother did 4 things. First, she revoked the general power of attorney that named my father as her agent, the one my mother had been quietly encouraging him to update for years. Second, she signed a new, very narrow, durable power of attorney that named me, with explicit restrictions: no real estate transactions, no sale of personal property, no access to retirement accounts, and a clause that the document was void if she was ever pressured, isolated, or examined for capacity without Margaret present. Third, she transferred the deed of the Wisteria Lane house into a revocable living trust she had created in Earl's memory. The trust had 1 trustee, herself, and 1 successor trustee, me. The beneficiaries were named, sealed, and not to be disclosed until her death. Fourth, and this is the part my mother would later choke on, she signed a notarized affidavit, witnessed by 2 attorneys and a notary, attesting that she was of sound mind, had not been diagnosed with any cognitive impairment, and that any future claim to the contrary by a family member should be treated as evidence of fraud. Margaret made 6 certified copies. 2 went into Margaret's safe. 2 went into a safe deposit box at South State Bank. 1 went into Addie's green notebook. 1 came home with me in a manila envelope I was instructed not to open unless she gave me a phone call with the exact sentence: "Ren, it is time." Addie went home. She made banana bread. She watched Wheel of Fortune. She wrote in her notebook. And she waited. My parents began their plan in March. I did not know this at the time. None of us did, except Addie, who somehow knew everything before anyone said anything out loud. My mother contacted a real estate agent named Cheryl Pratt, the kind of agent who specializes in sensitive family situations, which is a phrase that should make every grandmother in America nervous. Cheryl came to the house on a Tuesday afternoon when my mother had taken Addie to a long lunch on the other side of town. Cheryl walked through every room. She took photos. She made notes. She estimated the home at $490,000, suggested a quick sale price of $480,000, and told my mother, in writing, that the transaction would be cleanest if the seller had legal authority over the property. My mother said she did. Cheryl, who should have known better, did not double-check. In April, my father signed a power of attorney form that authorized him to sell Addie's house on her behalf. Addie's signature was on it. Addie had not signed it. My mother had, in front of a notary friend who notarized it without ever meeting my grandmother. That is forgery. That is fraud. That, in South Carolina, is a felony. In May, the house was quietly listed off-market through Cheryl's private buyer network. By June, an offer came in at $480,000 cash from a couple relocating from Charlotte. By July, the deal was in escrow. By August, my mother had begun, very subtly, telling extended family that Addie was struggling lately and might need to move into assisted living soon. She told my father's sister Lorraine that Addie had forgotten her own birthday. Addie had not. Addie had simply refused to attend the party my mother had thrown at a restaurant Addie hated. In September, the buyers requested a walkthrough. My mother arranged it on a Wednesday afternoon when she knew Addie would be at her weekly bridge game. Addie was not at her weekly bridge game. Addie was sitting in her car, 3 houses down, with Margaret Vance in the passenger seat, photographing every person who entered her home through her own front door using a key she had not given them. The buyers. The agent. My father. My mother holding a clipboard. Margaret had a private investigator on retainer by then. He was in a parked van across the street, recording video. Addie waved at him once. He waved back. The closing was scheduled for Friday, October 11th at 2 p.m. at the offices of a title company on Pendleton Street. On Thursday, October 10th, at 9:42 in the morning, my phone rang. It was Addie. Her voice was steady. She said, "Ren, it is time." I opened the manila envelope. Inside were the certified copies, a one-page typed summary of the fraud as Margaret had documented it, a list of every law that had been broken, and a single sticky note in Addie's handwriting that said, "Wear the navy dress. We're going to a closing." I cried for about 90 seconds. Then I got in the car. Friday at 1:58 p.m., my parents walked into the title company in matching beige outfits, holding a folder Cheryl had prepared, smiling like people who had already spent the money in their heads. The buyers were already at the table. The closing agent was already at the table. Cheryl was already at the table. The notary was already at the table. My mother sat down, accepted a bottle of sparkling water, and said, brightly, "Let's get this done." At 2 p.m. exactly, the conference room door opened, and my grandmother walked in. Addie was wearing pearls. She had her green notebook under one arm. Margaret Vance was beside her in a charcoal suit. I was behind them in the navy dress. The private investigator was behind me with a tablet. My mother's face did three things in the span of 4 seconds. Confusion, calculation, collapse. My father whispered, "Mom, what are you doing here?" Addie said very calmly, "Davis, I am the seller. Or so I have been told." Margaret laid the certified documents on the table one by one. The revocation of the old power of attorney, dated February. The new narrow power of attorney naming me, dated February. The trust deed transferring the house to the Earl Holloway Family Trust, dated February. The notarized capacity affidavit, dated February. The forged power of attorney my father had signed in April, with Addie's real signature attached for comparison. The photographs from September. The video from the walkthrough. The notary log showing my mother's friend had notarized a signature for a woman she had never met. The closing agent went very pale and said, "I'm going to need to stop this transaction." The buyers, to their credit, were horrified. They had not known. They thanked Addie for coming. They left with their deposit refunded and a written apology from Cheryl, who lost her license within 90 days. The notary lost hers in 60. My mother's friend, the one who had notarized a forged signature without meeting the signer, was charged with fraudulent notarization, a misdemeanor that became a felony when combined with the property value involved. My father sat in the conference room chair and put his face in his hands. He said, "Mom, please." Addie looked at him for a long moment. Then she said the sentence I think about almost every day. She said, "Davis, I raised you in that house. I did not raise you to sell it." My mother tried to speak. Addie did not let her. Addie opened the green notebook to a page near the back, in handwriting from March, and read aloud one sentence she had written down after my mother's comment at a Sunday dinner. The sentence was, "Marcy said today that Addie won't need the house much longer." Davis laughed. Addie closed the notebook. She said, "Marcy, I have been taking notes for 14 years. Would you like me to read more?" My mother did not answer. My mother stood up and walked out, and that was the last time she has ever been inside a room with Addie present. The criminal case took 11 months. My father pleaded guilty to a reduced charge in exchange for testifying about my mother's role. He received probation, 200 hours of community service, and a permanent record. My mother fought every charge until her own attorney told her that Margaret Vance had been preparing the evidentiary file since February, and that fighting it would only add years. She accepted a plea. 18 months suspended, 5 years of probation, full restitution of legal fees, and a no-contact order with Addie that Addie herself requested in writing. My parents are separated now. Not divorced. Just separated. In that gray Southern way where nobody says the word out loud, but everybody knows. My father lives in a one-bedroom apartment on the other side of town and comes to Addie's house on Sundays. He sits on the back porch my grandfather built. He does not ask to come inside. Addie brings him sweet tea. They talk about the weather. Sometimes about Earl. Never about Marcy. Healing in our family looks like a porch and a glass and a woman who has decided, on her own terms, exactly how much forgiveness she is willing to pour. The house on Wisteria Lane is still in the Earl Holloway Family Trust. I am still the successor trustee. The beneficiaries are still sealed. Addie still makes banana bread. She still watches Wheel of Fortune. She still writes in the green notebook, although the entries lately have been kinder, mostly about the cardinals at the feeder and a neighbor's new puppy. Last month, on her 79th birthday, she handed me a small wrapped box. Inside was a brass key on a leather cord and a card in her handwriting that said, "Wren." The house was never the inheritance. The notebook was. Keep writing. If you made it to the end, comment the word notebook so I know. And if you believe the quietest woman at the table is usually the one who has already won 3 months ago, subscribe to her silence. Because sometimes they sell what is not theirs, smile while doing it, and tell the world you are too old to notice. And sometimes a 78-year-old woman in pearls walks into a closing room at 2 p.m. on a Friday in October, opens a green notebook, and reminds her own daughter that grandmothers do not forget. They file.